When his beloved wife, Kathryn, is suspected of betraying the nation, intelligent agent George Woodhouse faces the ultimate test: loyalty to his marriage or his country. Black Bag is directed by Steven Soderbergh and stars Cate Blanchett, Michael Fassbender, and many more. So, Jeffrey, what did you think of Black Bag?
So I can't believe that we've never reviewed a Steven Soderbergh movie on the channel before, which is wild because I think he's one of the most prolific and influential and interesting directors working in Hollywood. So he first burst onto the scene with Sex, Lies, and a Videotape, and that was in 1989. That film went on to win both the Sundance Audience Award and also the Palme d'Or that year. And in a lot of ways, it anticipates the independent film boom of the 90s. It was just a year early. A lot of that is credited to him. And that film, you haven't seen that movie, right?
No.
That film is extraordinary. And I'm sorry that you have to use the beep or whatever to beat me out, but one of the best independent American movies ever made. It's incredible. That starts his career, and then his career goes in all these different directions. He has directed everything from low budget horror thrillers to the Ocean's 11 franchise to the Magic Mike franchise. He's always pushing his boundaries, and he really, really likes to experiment and he likes to innovate. He shot an entire film on an iPhone 7. He was not the first to do that, but one of the first to do that, especially for a large mainstream film. He's experimented with using old Canon camcorders to make his films, in full frontal, but it just goes to show how much of an innovator he is and how he's never ever complacent. He's always interested in doing something else. You really can't calculate what his movies are going to look like because the style, it varies really greatly film to film. That's by way of long introduction to say that Black Bag rocks. It's just great. It's Soderbergh's best movie in more than a decade, in my opinion, and it's just very intelligent, very quickly edited, very stylish spy thriller that knows exactly what it is, and it executes on all of the levels that it needs to in order to be the best thing as it is without overstaying its welcome or trying to do more than is prescribed by the script. When I throw around a term like well made, when I say a film is well made, this is exactly what I think of. I think of a very strong script that's intricately woven, and the visual style and visual execution perfectly matches the writing material that it's based off of. So I had this pretty distinct buzzy feeling walking out of the theater that this was just a blast of a movie. There's double crosses, there's a winding, interesting narrative, there's interesting characters. The movie is intense but self-aware and serious but really humorous. I don't want to overstate it too much because it's a small film of small ambitions. It's not a movie that's going to change your life, but it's a blast.
Yeah.
And it's 88 minutes long. I didn't even have to pee during this thing. It was great. It was great.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was reading an article actually where Soderbergh was talking about how he preferred to call this a movie rather than a film. Mm-hmm. And that was very purposeful because it doesn't take itself too seriously. It's lighthearted and fun. It gives you the vibes of a summer blockbuster in many ways, or a 90s thriller. I think with him labeling the movie as a movie versus a film, he wanted to show that it was applicable to a larger audience, I think that's where he was going with this film, and I entirely think he succeeded. I thought it was just an absolute blast. It was a short 90 minutes with this really propulsive script that is very dialogue heavy, but also extremely digestible. It does seem like maybe sometimes the movie is moving at such a fast clip, and with the heavy dialogue, this film is so hilarious, and I think some of that hilarity went over some of the people's heads in our theaters because you and I busted out laughing so many times where other people in our theater were completely silent.
Yeah, and it wasn't a full theater, but I mean, there's maybe 20 people in there. We would have heard a laugh.
Yeah,
it was a smaller type theater. We would have heard a laugh. I was really surprised at the lack of people getting the humor.
Yeah, so I think you really have to pay attention and digest this dialogue because it comes at you fast. But if you really do pay attention and you listen to it, this movie is absolutely hysterical. We have Michael Fassbender and Cate Blanchett. They played this married couple, Kathryn and George, and they both work in this British spy agency. Michael Fassbender's character starts to believe that Kathryn is involved in this plot to give this device program thing over to the Russians. And so he is kind of trailing her, tracking her. He's getting information from other people that work at the spy agency. The movie opens up with this great one-shot take that follows him through this bar.
Oh, that is one shot. I didn't even put that together.
Yeah, it's completely one shot. It follows him through this bar to this informant who informs him that spy agency has been compromised.
I actually love this opening because it just throws us into it. It's more of like a stylistic introduction to make you feel for the movie that you're going to see in a couple minutes. We get that information, we're left with it, and it's just like Focus Features presents Black Bag. Like it's like right to the drama. It's kind of like how Christopher Nolan starts his movies. He just propels you into the action. You're like, what is happening? Like I love starting movies that way. It's my favorite way to start a movie.
Yeah, in terms of recent movies that I could probably compare this to, it'd probably be like the Knives Out series. That's another movie that I think is very similar in the way that it presents us with all these very distinct and unique characters. They're all intertwined in some way, but our main protagonist has to sort of figure out who the culprit is amongst them. So this is displayed to us through these dinner parties that happen during the movie. There's two of them, one actually towards the beginning. And this is where we actually get to meet all these characters and start to feel them out in terms of their differing personality traits. I want to go back to Kathryn and George because these two, Michael Fassbender and Cate Blanchett, have such a great dynamic in this movie. Their conversation is often very blunt with each other. They're very sure of themselves and have this great handle on their emotions. I think that would be kind of obvious being in the spy world. Yep. But they do have some distinct differences in personality traits between the two of them. Blanchett is extremely charismatic and mysterious, while Fassbender is very inquisitive and a bit dry or standoffish. They make this very likely unlikely pair, but what the movie does so great is it keeps you guessing as to whether they're either very perfect for each other or they could not be worse for each other.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like the main defining piece of this movie. Does this couple work or do they not work at all? And what is happening between them?
It's an interesting romantic entanglement that they find themselves in. Some of the other characters find themselves in. And that's where the title of the movie comes from. When a couple is a spy, they're both spies, and they may ask themselves, or they may ask their partner a very innocuous question like, hey, do you want to do this on Tuesday night? They'll say black bag, meaning that they're going to be doing something Tuesday night that needs to be secret from the other one in terms of their job. Yeah. It's totally fascinating. I thought the characters in this movie were really finely drawn, especially for how little we learn about them. You mentioned this about the script, but it's a film of really tense, terse conversations and not so much action.
Yeah.
And it's really thrilling to watch people speak and interpret their shifting loyalties, what secrets they know that they're withholding from the other person, what partial bits of secrets they're going to let out to try to get leverage in a conversation. It's absolutely thrilling to watch as a viewer. And some of that is due to the writing, of course, but a lot of it is due to the acting. And Michael Fassbender in particular is extraordinary in this movie. And again, he's this isn't going to be an Oscar nominated role or anything, but he has such a brooding sense, a calculating sense about him that you can always tell that his mind is working. The film imposes this interesting thing on him that he's a human lie detector test, a human polygraph, but you believe it completely because he's so convincing in his role. You get the impression that he's a person that is very, very into the details, just as this film is. And I don't know. I just thought that he was really, really great. Cate Blanchett is great too. She just has a little less to work with than him. She has more in the second half.
So going from here, I want to talk a little bit about the look of the film because it is extremely distinct. I think it's using a lot of practical lighting, it seems, especially in these dinner sequences. I don't know if you've noticed, but the lighting is pretty much overblown in a lot of the scenes, like the highlights.
Oh, it shows almost like an echo around the light?
Yeah. I just actually liked the way that looked. It kind of gave me this old-timey kind of mysterious vibe. It fit really well into maybe an old mystery film.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I love the way this movie looks. I think spy thrillers often have a kind of cool aesthetic and high technology and cool gadgets, and this movie doesn't have a ton of that. It has a little of that, but mostly the cool quality that we get from these spies are the modernist homes they live in and the set design and these gorgeously fitted suits. And I don't know, I love the aesthetic, but it's emblematic of those great British spy thrillers from the 70s that Michael Caine was in, or that type of elegant and quietly restrained existential quality that say a film like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy had. I love the way that the visuals worked in this film, and I think it did a lot to highlight what was on the page. If I was reading this script, this is exactly what I would picture. I wouldn't know how to execute it, but clearly he did.
Yeah, same as The Office where they work. It's very sterile.
They have one of those clickers that turns the windows blackout so that you can't see what they're saying, you can't read lips.
Yeah, everything is just so clean and meticulous, even in their lives, in their house. When certain details stand out, like a receipt for a movie in the trash bin.
Yeah.
That it seems so out of place in a world that is so meticulously cleaned.
I think this kind of ties in a little bit with the visual sense, but I just want to talk about some of the directing in this film because I think that Soderbergh is really, really smart in his use of the camera. He's really masterful at employing techniques that make sense without building an overwhelming sense of directing or like over directing a film. Like, even though it's a very good film, like The Brutalist is an example, a film that really needs you to know how well directed it is, whereas Soderbergh seems like he's always serving the story. So for instance, there's that oneer in the beginning that I barely noticed was a oneer because it works so well within the narrative. I was reminded during one of the dinner parties, there's a group shot that becomes a slow zoom on Michael Fassbender's face as his wife, Cate Blanchett, is talking about something that happened with his father. And you get to see his reaction. And that's not like the first time that's ever been employed or anything, but that's not a stylistic device that's used throughout the film. It's used at the perfect moment to get you to react to what he wants you to react to. So I really like the way that he employs these devices. He uses them as tools in a toolbox rather than having like a style that he's trying to impose on anything that he's making.
That's actually a great point because it ties a little bit into what I was talking about in our Mickey 17 review of how the plot seems to be driving the characters in that film.
Yeah.
And in this movie, it's the complete opposite. These characters are complete control of what is happening to this plot. And it seems so natural because all these characters are built so well that as these revelations become clear or we learn things about them, you see how they are influencing each other. But all these little details, it just goes to show that the characters are really driving where this plot is going.
So what you're saying too goes to something I want to talk about with this film, which is economy, knowing what to leave in and what to leave out. And this is both in the script and in the editing. As you kind of said, the film flies by and it drops a tremendous amount of information from scene to scene. And if you're not paying attention, it could be a little difficult to keep up. But I think the film deals with conveying information in a really interesting and helpful way. It moves fast enough to maintain mystery and intrigue, so it's never boring and it never feels like exposition because all it's doing is heightening that intrigue. But simultaneously, the information that it's using to propel the plot forward is also something you're learning about the characters, as you were saying before. So it's like the information within the script is serving dual functions, and you're able to establish both characters and narrative within the same bit of information, which is a great bit of economy. So this movie and the script trims so much fat from the narrative that by the end of it, there's not anything that feels out of place. And again, you could feel a bit lost with how much information it's giving you, but at the same time, I did feel like if you got the general sense of the scene, that you could understand where the film is going and not get too lost. But at the same time, if you wanted to observe the details and you wanted to pick apart how we get to each scene and how we get to each plot point, I think the film is actually really rewarding. So it works on both levels. I thought that it was really masterful in that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that goes to one of the thoughts I had coming out of the movie. I immediately remember saying that this felt like a sequel to a film. The way it thrusts you into this plot and then the way it leaves you at the end of the film makes you feel like these characters are just going through this again. They're going through these motions like they've done this before. Makes it feel like part of this larger story where there's more to come and that there was something before it. It's interesting to have that feeling for a movie that doesn't actually have a movie before it.
It's interesting to only see a week in these people's lives, but you're right that the fact that it thrusts you in is almost like it's assuming you have knowledge of these characters that you don't have.
So you ready to go to grades?
Yes, I'm going to give this movie a B+, which for how much I've lauded it may seem kind of low. It's basically an A for a spy thriller, but it's a spy thriller kind of thing. Like, it's not a movie that's going to change your life, but it is without a doubt the most fun I've had in a movie theater in the past couple months. And this was an absolute blast to watch in the theater. If you are someone who you like mainstream entertainment, you like films that are intelligently crafted, that are surprising, that have good characters, that keep you guessing, I think this film has all those in spades, and I think it's really good filmmaking on top of that.
I completely agree. I give the film an A-. It's funny, I was thinking the same thing as you. I probably would have given it an A if it wasn't for those same things that you had mentioned.
Yeah.
It's this great bridge between, I think, mainstream audiences and people that are looking for a little bit more of an elevated movie. And I think this movie managed to marry both of those things just absolutely perfectly.
Yeah, completely.
And it was just so much fun. All right, and that's it for our review of Black Bag. Black Bag is now in theaters, so if you haven't seen it, go check it out. Let us know in the comments, what did you think about this movie? As always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.